11:47 at night. Petra Dunleavy stood at the door of room 914 with a suitcase in one hand and a phone in the other. 4 hours late, a storm outside, a botched reservation. No other rooms in the building. The door opened. A man in a maintenance uniform stood on the other side, and behind him, in the lamplight, a child was sleeping on the bed. He did not speak. He looked at the phone in her hand, at the suitcase, at the child. Then he stepped aside. The man who let her in was being underestimated by everyone in that building, including her, and the drawing taped to the wall behind him was the only thing in that room that told the truth. 2 weeks before that night, Tate Wyndham was on the 3rd floor of the Aldercroft Inn, kneeling beside an open panel in the wall, his hands moving over a tangle of wires the way other men handled their morning coffee. He did not look at the schematic taped to the inside of the panel door. He did not need to. Somewhere down the hall, a vacuum cleaner ran, and beyond that, the soft murmur of the breakfast crowd in the dining room. Tate worked in silence, the way he did most things. A younger maintenance tech walked past, paused, doubled back. "Where did you learn this stuff, man? You went to a trade school or what?" Tate did not look up. On the job, the younger man waited a beat for more. None came. He moved on. 3 years earlier, Tate had been someone else. He had been the founder of a small engineering firm in Boston, with a framework his name was on, a system architecture for building automation, that more than 200 commercial properties across the country were now licensed to run. Aldercroft Inn was one of them, though nobody in the building knew it. He had sold the intellectual property to a holding fund in the months after his wife died, dissolved the company, and walked out of the industry without explaining himself to anyone who asked. There were not many who asked. The ones who did got the same 2-word answer he gave the younger tech. On the job. He worked at Aldercroft for one reason. The schedule let him pick Nora up from school every afternoon at 3:30, and he had not missed a single pickup in 2 years. The pay was a fraction of what he had once made in a quarter. He did not care. That night, after his shift, he sat at the small table in the staff break room with a paper bag of cold pasta in front of him and Nora on the chair across, her crayons spread out, her tongue pressed against the inside of her cheek the way it always was when she was concentrating. He scrolled through the maintenance log on his personal phone. Something in the entries from the past 48 hours did not sit right. Numbers had been rounded in ways that real numbers were not rounded. Timestamps had been edited and re-edited. Somebody was scrubbing the record before it went upstairs. He copied the raw data onto a small flash drive and slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket. He did not act yet. He watched. "Daddy." He looked up. "Why do we live here instead of our house?" He set the phone down. Nora was looking at him with the absolute calm only a 7-year-old could carry. The kind that asked questions without bracing for the answer. He did not know how to answer this one. He had not figured out how to answer it for a long time. "We will," he said. "Soon." She nodded as if that was enough, and went back to her drawing. When she finally fell asleep on the small cot in the corner of the room they had been assigned, he picked up the page she had been working on. It was a tall building, inside the walls of the building, in patient crayon. She had drawn a network of lines and small rectangles, the lines branching and joining at angles that no child his daughter's age should have any reason to know. He did not know when she had seen the originals. He sat looking at the drawing for a long time. On a plane bound for the Aldercroft Inn, Petra Dunleavy was awake. Her laptop was open on the tray table in front of her, the cabin lights dimmed for the overnight flight. And beside her, Owen Bracht was reviewing the final summary of a deal his boss had spent 4 months building, $340 million. The hotel was not the prize. The land was. The hotel was an old building, sitting on a parcel of fiber optic infrastructure that Dunleavy Capital intended to convert into a commercial data center within 18 months. It was the most significant strategic move the company had made in 5 years. And Petra had not slept more than 5 hours a night since the negotiations began. Owen turned the laptop slightly toward her. "One number I keep coming back to. Operating costs on their automation system. 34% below industry standard." Petra read it without changing her expression. Efficiency or accounting? That is what I cannot tell from outside, then find out from inside. The next morning, she met Gil Harston in the executive lounge of the Aldercroft Inn for the first time. He was waiting for her with coffee, a pressed suit, and a smile that was professional in every measurable way, and somehow still made her want to count her fingers after shaking his hand. He walked her through the building. He talked the way men who had rehearsed talked. The numbers he quoted were clean. The reports were bound. Every question she asked, he answered before she finished asking it. Halfway through the tour, on the third-floor corridor, she passed a maintenance worker kneeling at an open wall panel. The man did not look up. His hands were moving with the kind of efficiency that did not announce itself. She watched for 3 seconds, then turned back to Gil and continued the tour. After Gil left her at the elevator, Owen caught up with her in the hallway. The 34%. That is not efficiency. Not on equipment that old. You are sure? I am sure enough to start looking. Quietly. He nodded and stepped away. Behind them, at the far end of the hallway, Gil Harston paused at the corner. He looked toward where the maintenance worker had been kneeling at the panel. He looked for longer than a man with nothing to think about would look. Then he walked on. 2 weeks later, on the night of the storm and the botched reservation, the front desk clerk at Aldercroft Inn was 23 years old and had been on the job for 6 weeks. The reservation system showed no available rooms. The general manager was off-site. The CEO of a holding company that was, according to internal communications, about to own the building stood at his desk with reins still on the shoulders of her coat and asked, in a voice that did not raise itself, what he was going to do about it. He called the general manager. The general manager called Tate Wyndham. In room 914, Tate set the phone down on the nightstand without putting it back to his ear. Nora was asleep. He stood for a few seconds looking at her. Then at the door. He understood the situation precisely. He had no leverage. He had a daughter who needed to sleep through the night. He pulled an extra blanket over her, picked up a pillow from his side of the bed, and walked to the door. Petra stepped in. She did not apologize. She did not thank him. Her eyes moved across the room the way a buyer's eyes moved across a property, the toolbox under the desk, the cold dinner on the table, the child on the bed, the drawing on the wall. They settled for a moment on the drawing. She did not yet understand what she was looking at. Tate turned off the lamp on his side of the room. He lay down on the small sofa with the pillow under his head and his back to her, and within 90 seconds his breathing was even. Petra stood in the half-dark with her suitcase still beside her foot. She had been raised to be looked at with deference, and she did not know what to do in a room where she was not. She set the laptop on the desk. She sat on the edge of the bed. She did not sleep for a long time. She woke at 6. The sofa was empty. The blanket folded. The child was gone. On the bed beside her was a hotel notepad and a pen. And on the notepad, in clean small handwriting, were 3 lines giving her the front desk number, the room service code, and the time housekeeping would be by. There was no name signed. By 7:30, she was in the boardroom in clothes she had pressed herself, and Gil Harston was waiting for her with his second cup of coffee and his bound report. He did not know where she had slept. He did not ask. He walked her through the operations summary. She turned to the page on maintenance costs and paused. Owen, sitting beside her, did not look up from his own copy. He gave one small nod. Across the lobby, through the glass doors of the boardroom, Tate Wyndham walked past with a tool bag over his shoulder. He did not look in. Gil's eyes flicked to him for half a second and back to Petra. She caught it. She did not say anything. The second morning of her stay. The central cooling system of the Aldercroft Inn failed. It failed at 10 minutes past 9. In the middle of a presentation, Gil had spent 40 minutes setting up, with 3 of Petra's senior people in the room, and the temperature already beginning to climb in the hallways outside. The server room on the lower level was the immediate concern. If those servers crossed a certain temperature, the entire transactional infrastructure of Dunleavy Capital's East Coast operations would degrade. Petra did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Everyone in the room understood what was at stake. Gil's in-house team worked the problem for 25 minutes. They could not find the root cause. He called an outside contractor. The contractor was 2 hours away. He walked back into the boardroom with the kind of composed apology that men in his position practiced in front of mirrors and started explaining the contingency plan. Petra was no longer in the boardroom. She was at the door of the server room, watching. Tate Wyndham had walked in without being called. He had heard the alarm in the hallway. He stood for a moment in front of the main control panel, hands at his sides, eyes moving across the readouts, the way a man read a sentence. Then he walked behind the rack to a small access panel at the rear that the in-house team had not opened in the entire 25 minutes they had been there. He unscrewed it. He worked in silence. The system came back online in 11 minutes. Petra stood at the door and watched him close the panel and stand up. He did not look at her. He did not look at anyone. He gathered his tools and walked out the way he had walked in. Petra's senior systems director was a man named Marsh, paid more than $500,000 a year, and he had not moved during the entire 11 minutes. He stepped forward now and stopped Tate in the hallway. That access panel, what about it? That was not in the original schematic. Where did you learn about it? Tate looked at him for a beat. It is in the original schematic, the one the building was built from. Somebody redrew the working copy and left it off. Marsh did not speak for a moment. Then he nodded. Slowly. The way a man nodded when he had just understood something about the person standing in front of him. He stepped back. Tate walked on. In the boardroom, Marsh did not return to his seat right away. He stood at the window for a long minute looking out at the courtyard. When he finally sat back down, Petra glanced at him and asked quietly what he had seen. He took a breath before answering. He read the architecture without a manual. He found a panel my team did not know existed. He talked to me for 10 seconds, and I understood that he has built systems. I have spent 20 years trying to learn how to build. Petra did not respond. She filed the sentence the way she filed everything she would think about later. Gil arrived in the hallway 30 seconds later, papers in his hand, his voice already rising into the practiced register of management. He served Tate with a written reprimand on the spot, in front of Petra, for acting outside the scope of his job description. Tate took the paper. He did not read it. He folded it once and put it in the back pocket of his work pants. He kept walking. Petra looked at Gil. For the first time, she looked at him the way she had looked at the numbers in his report, with the small, narrow focus of a woman beginning to suspect that something was not what it appeared to be. That night she pulled Owen into her room and asked him about the operating cost number again. He had been working on it for 48 hours. It is not efficiency, he said. By whom? That is what I cannot tell yet. The framework the building runs on was developed by a small firm out of Boston. The firm dissolved 3 years ago. The intellectual property was sold to an anonymous holding fund. There is no public record of the founder's name. Petra was quiet for a long moment. Find out who built this system. By the third morning, Owen had a name. Or rather, he had the absence of one. The patent filings had been submitted under an LLC that had been wound down within a year of registration. The trail ended. He told Petra what he had, which was very little, and she told him to keep looking. She asked Gil for the original technical handover documentation. Gil told her that the records had been transferred with the acquisition 4 years earlier and were no longer held on site. He said it smoothly. He said it the way a man said it who had said it before. Petra did not press. She watched him say it. She filed it. That afternoon, Nora arrived at the hotel after school. Tate was on the 3rd floor working on a burst pipe and could not come down. The front desk sat her in the lobby with her crayons and her drawing pad, and she set herself up on a low couch beside the window and began to work. Petra came through the lobby on her way to a meeting and saw her. She stopped without meaning to. The child looked up. "Are you the lady from Daddy's room?" Petra did not have an answer ready. The child waited the way children waited, when they were not embarrassed by silence. "I am," Petra said. "You can sit if you want." Petra sat. She did not know why. Nora went back to her drawing without further comment. After a minute, Petra looked over. It was the same kind of drawing she had seen taped to the wall in room 914. A tall building, with a network of branching lines inside the walls. The lines did not branch at random. They branched at angles. They terminated at small rectangles. The rectangles were spaced in a sequence that anyone who had ever read an engineering diagram would have recognized in 2 seconds. Where did you learn to draw like that? Petra said. Daddy draws them when he thinks I am asleep. Petra did not move for a long moment. She looked at the page. She looked at the child. She looked back at the page. She was still looking at it when Gil Harston walked into the lobby behind her, saw her sitting with the child, paused for a fraction of a second, and walked on without acknowledging that he had paused. She did not see him. Owen did. Owen, who had been crossing the lobby on his way to her, saw all of it. He kept walking. In Gil's office, 20 minutes later, Gil closed the door behind Owen and offered him a chair. You are looking into the maintenance records. I am doing the work I was hired to do. There is a finish line on this deal. There are bonuses tied to it. For everyone. I am sure you are aware. Owen did not sit. I am aware. I am only saying. Some kinds of looking can slow a deal down without changing the outcome of it. Owen looked at him for a moment longer than the conversation required. Then he opened the door and walked out without speaking. That evening, he reported the conversation to Petra, word for word, in the same flat tone he used for everything. Petra listened. She thanked him. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Late that night, in the basement staff locker room of the Aldercroft Inn, Tate Wyndham opened his locker and reached for the inside pocket of the jacket hanging at the back. The pocket was empty. The flash drive was gone. He stood very still for a moment. He closed the locker. He walked out into the hallway and looked up at the small black dome of the security camera above the door. For the first time, he stopped watching. He moved. He did not go to Gil. He went around him. He sent a single message to Owen Brecht through the contact information posted on the public investor page of Dunleavy Capital, from a private email address that had not been used in 3 years. The message read, "Tell her the system she is buying is running on falsified maintenance records. I had proof. I do not anymore. We should talk." Owen showed Petra the message before he answered it. Could be a disgruntled employee. Could be the man from the server room. She was quiet for a moment. Set it up. You are in the room. The meeting happened the next morning at 10, in a small conference room off the executive floor that Gil did not have a key to. Tate walked in without a folder, without a laptop, without anything in his hands. He sat down across from Petra and Owen and did not speak until she did. You sent the message. I did. You have no documentation. Not anymore. It was taken out of my locker the night before last. 11 minutes of the hallway camera footage outside the staff locker room was deleted on the night in question. The deletion was logged from an administrator account that was created on this system 6 months ago. The account is not associated with any employee in the Human Resources directory. Owen did not look up from his laptop. He was typing fast. Tate continued. The maintenance logs for the past 18 months show systematic edits. Specifically, expense entries from the vendor processing for the secondary cooling system. The edits are made after hours, between 2 and 4 in the morning, on a roughly 7-day cycle. The pattern is consistent enough to identify a single editor. Owen looked up. I have everything you just said. I have logs that match it. I did not have a name for the editor. I do not have a name either. I have the access pattern. The pattern points to a workstation on the operations floor. Petra did not move. She watched him. Why are you telling me this? She said. You work for this hotel. I work here so I can pick my daughter up from school at 3:30. That is the only reason. You expect me to walk away from a $340 million deal on the word of a maintenance worker with no documentation. I expect you to do whatever you need to do. I am telling you what I know. What you do with it is your decision. She looked at him for a long moment. Who are you? He stood up. Someone who knows this building better than anyone in it. He walked out. Petra sat without moving for a count of 10. Then she turned to Owen. Freeze the deal. 48 hours. Reason cited as standard pre-close diligence. Gil will know what it means. I know. The freeze hit Gil's inbox at 11:17 that morning. He read it standing at his desk. His face did not change. He did not call anyone in his office. He stepped out into the hallway, walked to the stairwell, and made a single phone call from his personal phone. He did not know that the internal phone system at the Aldercroft Inn had been routing all stairwell calls through the security log since the system was installed by the man who had designed it. He did not know that Owen Bracht, sitting in a small office 2 floors down, had access to that log because Tate Wyndham had quietly forwarded him a credential string that morning. The call was 41 seconds long. Owen had a transcript by lunch. By the 5th morning of Petra Dunleavy's stay at the Aldercroft Inn, Owen Bracht had a folder in front of her that was 3 inches thick. He walked her through it without sitting down. The bound report had a clean cover. The contents did not. For 18 months, the maintenance expense line on the Aldercroft Inn's monthly operating statements had been inflated by an average of 42%. The inflated amount had been routed through a vendor named Coastline Services Group, an LLC registered in Delaware with a single-named officer who was not Gil Harston. The single-named officer was Gil Harston's wife's cousin. The cousin had no operational involvement. The cousin received a fee. The remainder of the funds, on a regular 6-week cycle, were transferred to a holding account in the Cayman Islands that, after 3 layers of shell ownership, traced back to a trust whose sole beneficiary was Gil Harston himself. The total amount diverted, over 18 months, was $2,300,000. It would not have been caught by your standard pre-close diligence, Owen said. The amounts are below the threshold that triggers external audit. The vendor passes every surface check. He set it up to survive a fast acquisition, which is what your acquisition was about to be. Petra read the page in front of her without speaking. She turned to the next page, then the next. If I had signed on Friday, you would have inherited the liability, the fraud, the exposure, and he would have been on a beach by the time anyone found it. Almost certainly. She closed the folder. There is one more thing, Owen said. It is the part I do not have an explanation for yet. He set a second folder on the table. Inside was a printed copy of a patent filing from 6 years earlier. The patent covered the core framework architecture of the building automation system installed throughout the Aldercroft Inn. The filing had been made under the same LLC that had since been wound down. The signature at the bottom of the cover page was clean and small, and clearly legible. T. Wyndham. Petra looked at the name for a long time. She looked out the window of her suite. Across the courtyard, on the second-floor service walkway, a man in a maintenance uniform was kneeling beside an electrical panel. She put the folder down. She walked downstairs alone. She found him at the panel. The hallway was empty. She stood beside him for a moment, neither of them speaking, while he closed the panel and stood up. T. Wyndham, she said. That is you. He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. Does that change anything about what I told you, he said. She did not answer immediately. It changes some things, she said. It does not change others. Which ones does it change? What I owe you, you do not owe me anything. I told you what I told you, because the building was about to be handed to somebody who was using it as a piggy bank. I would have told whoever was in your chair. She looked at him. She did not believe that was the whole truth. She did not say so. There is one thing, he said before she turned to go. Gil has known who I am since the first week I started here. He keeps a copy of my old company filings in the bottom drawer of his desk. He has never spoken to me about it. He never told you. You should ask him why. He picked up his tool bag and walked away. The confrontation was set for 1 o'clock the following afternoon, in the largest of the executive conference rooms on the top floor of the Aldercroft Inn. Petra sat at the head of the table. Owen sat to her right with a laptop and a folder. The hotel's outside counsel sat at the foot of the table. 2 members of the property's board of directors joined by video, their faces on a flat screen at the back wall. Gil Harston came in at 1:01, in a charcoal suit, his hair combed, his hands empty. He sat down across from Petra. He smiled the same professional smile he had used on the first day. He did not yet know what was in the folder. Petra opened it. She walked him through the records. The Coastline Services Group, the cousin, the Cayman Trust, the cycle, the total. She did not raise her voice once. She read from the documents in the flat, clean voice of a woman reading aloud from a contract. Gil began to push back at the 3rd page. He had explanations for each item. He had explanations that were technically not impossible. He had been preparing his explanations for a long time. Petra let him finish. Then she set a second piece of paper on the table. It was the patent filing. "The man you have been filing written complaints against for the past 6 days," she said, "built the system this entire building runs on. You have known since his first week. So tell me, Gil, what exactly were you protecting?" Gil did not answer. The room was completely silent. The board members on the screen did not move. Owen did not look up. Outside counsel did not breathe. After a long moment, Gil shifted in his chair. His voice came back. It was a different voice now. Thinner. "And what about him?" Gil said. "A senior engineer who walked out of his industry 3 years ago, who hides from his own name in a maintenance uniform." "You want to talk about who is hiding what?" The room did not move. On the screen at the back wall, one of the board members leaned slightly forward. The other looked down at his desk. Petra did not flinch. She had felt the shape of that question coming since the moment Owen had said the word patent in her office 2 days earlier. She had not yet answered it for herself. She was not going to let Gil be the one to ask it. Petra looked at him. "That question," she said, "is not yours to ask in this room." She closed the folder. "You will not leave the property while the investigation is underway. You will not access company systems. You will surrender your credentials to outside counsel by close of business. The board will be voting on your removal within 72 hours. We are done." She stood. Gil stood too. He looked at her for a moment, as if he was going to say something else. He looked at outside counsel. He looked at the screen at the back of the room where the 2 board members were no longer looking at him. He walked out of the room without speaking. Outside, in the hallway, Owen handed Petra a small audio file from the stairwell call. Yesterday, she listened to it through one earbud. It was 41 seconds. The voice on the other end of the line was Gil's chief accountant at Aldercroft. Gil's voice was the one giving the instruction. "Delete everything from the 3rd quarter onward." Tonight, Petra handed the earbud back. She did not say anything. The accountant was now in a separate conference room 3 floors down, with outside counsel and a recording device, agreeing to cooperate in exchange for a reduced exposure on her own role in the scheme. The 41 seconds of Gil's voice had been enough. Petra walked to find Tate. She found him in the basement, in the staff break room, sitting at the small table where he ate his lunch. Nora was at school. There was a paper bag in front of him. He had not opened it. "I want to know why you left the industry," Petra said. He did not look up for a moment. "That is not part of what you need to know to make your decision. I am not asking as a buyer." He set the paper bag aside. He looked at her. "My wife died 3 years ago, on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the office finalizing a licensing contract, the biggest contract of my career. I did not pick up the phone the first 3 times the hospital called. By the time I picked up the 4th time, it was over." He did not look away. "I did not leave the industry because the industry did anything to me. I left it because I had figured out, finally, that there is no contract worth the call I did not answer. I came here because the schedule lets me pick my daughter up at 3:30. That is the only reason. There is no other reason." Petra did not speak for a long moment. "I read everything wrong," she said. "You read what you saw." There was not very much to see. There was enough. That night, Owen brought her one more thing. He had found a deleted file on a backup server that Gil had not known existed, because it lived on a redundancy system that the framework's original designer had built into the architecture as a non-deletable archive. The file was a copy of the original licensing agreement between Aldercroft Inn and Tate Wyndham's now dissolved company, signed 6 years earlier. In paragraph 14 of that agreement, if, at any point during the term of the license, the operational data produced by the framework was falsified, edited, or misrepresented for the purpose of misleading any party, including, but not limited to, a prospective acquirer, the licensor reserved the right to revoke the license in full, immediately, without compensation. The license was the foundation of the entire building. Every elevator, every security system, every climate node, every transaction running through the front desk depended on it. Without it, the system did not legally run. The building would be dark by morning. Petra read the clause twice. She understood what it meant. The man in the maintenance uniform downstairs had been, For the entire week, she had been chasing her acquisition. The one person on the property who could end her deal with a signature. He could have done it the moment he heard the first edited log entry was being filed. He had not. Owen, standing at the door, said it before she could. He never used it. No, he could have walked into your office on day one and revoked the license. The deal would have collapsed within 24 hours. Your exposure would have been zero. His leverage would have been total. He did not do that. No, he let you find it on your own. Petra closed the folder. She walked downstairs again. He was still at the small table. The paper bag had been opened. He had eaten about half of what was inside. She set the printed clause on the table in front of him. Did you know this was in there? I wrote it. Then you knew. I knew, and you did not. No. Why? He looked at her. Because the building did not deserve to fail. The people who work here did not deserve to lose their jobs. And because you walked into a room 2 nights ago and did not pretend to be anything you were not, that counted for something. I do not know yet how much. She did not answer for a long time. On the 7th morning, Petra sat alone in room 914. The bed was made. The sofa was folded. The toolbox was gone. The cold dinner long cleared. The only thing left on the wall was the child's drawing. Still taped above the small desk, the lines of the building branching inside the walls in patient, exact crayon. She had spent 2 hours that morning on the phone with the board. Gill's removal had been confirmed by a vote of 6-1, with the one abstention coming from the only member who had not yet been able to review the audio file. Outside counsel had handed the case to the United States Attorney's Office. The total exposure to Dunleavy Capital, given that the deal had been frozen in time, would amount to legal fees and a slightly delayed timeline. The acquisition would close. The data center conversion would proceed. None of that was why she was still in the room. She looked at the drawing for a long time before she made the call. She offered him a position, not a purchase of the framework, not an acquisition of his intellectual property. A position, chief architect, for the conversion of the Aldercroft Inn property, full authority over the technical infrastructure of the project, a salary that would have been competitive in the industry he had left 3 years earlier, a schedule structured to guarantee a 3:30 school pickup every day without exception for as long as his daughter was in school. He did not answer right away. He looked out the window of the small office she had brought him into, in the direction of the elementary school 4 blocks east, and he was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded once. He did not shake her hand. He did not sign anything. He just nodded. Nora came in after school with her backpack and her hair coming out of the elastic she had tied it with that morning. She stopped in the doorway when she saw Petra in the room. Are you staying? Petra looked at Tate. She looked back at the child. That depends on your father. Nora turned to Tate. She considered him with the small absolute seriousness she gave to most things. Daddy? She can have the bed. You said the sofa was fine anyway. Tate looked at his daughter. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, for the first time since the night Petra had walked into his room with a suitcase and a phone, he smiled. It was a small smile. It did not last more than a second or two, but Petra, who had spent a week watching him give nothing away, saw it land. She left Aldercroft late that evening. The car was waiting at the curb. She paused before getting in, and turned, and looked back at the building once. Through the lobby window, she could see a small girl at the front desk, a paper bag in her hand, talking to the same young desk clerk who had called her father from the lobby phone 7 days earlier. Beside the desk, a man in a clean shirt was reading something on a tablet, listening to his daughter without looking up. She had walked into the building 7 days earlier to buy an asset. She was walking out of it with something else. Something that did not appear on any of the spreadsheets she had brought with her. Something she was not yet ready to put a word to. Neither of them had been looking for anything beyond the next transaction, the next school pickup, the next ordinary day, but somewhere between a borrowed pillow and a child's drawing on the wall. Something had shifted that no system in the building could have predicted.